Hi,
Recording in progress.
it's happening.
It's happening. Uh, well,
Welcome to episode two. Not a lot of podcasts actually ever make it out of episode one, so good on us.
yeah, we're already succeeding.
We're already succeeding. It is only up from here. I'm Jake Sikowski. I am the designer, founder, CEO of Cosmic Plumbing. This is Trey Henry,
And I am the CTO, founder, and I don't know, engineering monkey.
and we make a piece of software that is called Cosmic Plumbing. Today, what we wanted to talk to you all about is what we're calling chart sausage. Do you want to talk a little bit, Trey, about why we? Excuse me. First of all, let me make sure that we got all of the meta information going.
Oh yeah.
Today is the 30th of September, 2023. It is 7:59 p.m. and we are both seated in the beautiful city of Stralsund in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern here in Germany, otherwise known as Deutschland.
Yeah, exactly. So we had this last week. We had a cycle that was devoted to many things related to making the chart real-ish, real from a more from a back-end engineering perspective, as will be apparent when we get into the demos here in a little bit. And so we called the cycle chart sausage because
Chart
it's the
sausage.
sausage making part of this
Um,
whole process.
One thing I just realized, the reason we're in Stralsund and not in Berlin is because we're just here on a little bit of a holiday, and you can tell we're in an Airbnb because this piece of art right here is yours for the low, low price of 25 euros. If you are,
Wait,
if
there's
you
really
are
a
so
price on
inclined.
it?
Yeah, this one has a price. Oh, that one. No, that do they all have prices? 25, 25. 45 for that one. The one up here that's 25 is the FKK sign. Trey, would you
Oh,
like to describe a little bit about FKK? Like, and what is Freikörperkultur?
yeah. Freikörperkultur is a German, is a really fascinating German cultural thing. That it's about nudity. So it's like being nude on the beach, for example. So you'll maybe see a sign that says FKK, like arrow this way, which basically means like that's a place where you can be completely nude on the beach, for
You
example.
can see it here. This is, oh, you can
Yeah,
see the reflection in the, let me try to, you can't see it. It's
yeah,
fine.
yeah, yeah.
If the art off the wall, that means we bought it, unfortunately. That's,
Yeah. There's a
that's how
really
the,
interesting history behind it though, because it's also related to kind of it was sort of a resistance movement as well, um, that was kind of used to sort of uh, express a cultural identity that was maybe not in line with government oppressors.
culture. Yes, the
Yeah,
fascism that was happening at the time.
yeah.
It's very brilliant. That's not what our check-in question is about, like you like
No.
about nudity, but rather, and our agenda today here is to talk about what's your favorite planet today. Today,
Oh
on the
yeah,
30th of September.
I forgot we
Trey,
had a check-in question.
yeah, what is your favorite planet today? This is your check-in question, so good on you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I came up with it this morning, and that was too
That
far
was
ago for me to remember anything
an
about.
eternity ago. Exactly.
Uh, yeah, you want me to go first? No, it's my question. You go first.
Okay, well, it's very prominent in my chart, and if you start to learn a little bit more about my personality, you will learn that my favorite planet and the one that definitely rules me in probably all aspects of life is Saturn. And the reason that Saturn rules me so hard is because I am filled to the brim with the idea of justice and judgment. So, my favorite show, anyone take a guess? You're correct. Judge Judy, otherwise known now as Judy Justice on the Freevee network. Yeah, and so I am heavy justice. I don't think that you would normally choose a malefic to be your favorite planet of the day, but hey, that's also very much in line with me. Very Slytherin in that kind of way.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You also have like a anybody who has ever wronged you or who has done wrong around you is like forever remembered, and will eventually justice will be brought.
Yeah. Even if that justice is brought by natural causes, it will happen. And I will feel good about it. Exactly. Natural causes. Let's be clear, they're all natural causes.
It occurred in nature.
Yeah, exactly. It can't be bad. It occurred in nature. True, what is your favorite planet today?
I would have to go with the moon. My chart is parts of my chart anyway are sort of comically sort of the kind of example chart of domicile. We can see your butt, honey.
Oh, sorry.
So my ascendant is in Cancer, and the moon, which is the ruler of Cancer, is in Taurus, where she's exalted. And so I have a very strong connection with lunar things, and also the moon as being kind of this mediator between sort of the rest of the planets and sort of the beyond, basically, and then kind of like the day-to-day stuff down here on Earth. In sort of the, I don't know, what we generally call the Western magical traditions, which is a bad name, but that's what we have. The moon is kind of like the first go-to to any sort of like electional magic or anything that you wanted to do around dealing with like, planetary energies and things like that. The moon is the mediator, basically. So she's rad that way. So mediator, yeah.
Judge, jury, and executioner. There we go. We got it. We got it covered. And also, it's a very important. I'm going to stop sharing. It's very important, by the way, for our rabid audience, our viewerships in the 7s right now of our last video. That sometimes you have to do some marketing to get your podcast going, and showing a little bit of butt. Gonna work. I think we're gonna get, I bet you by the end of next week, at the end of next cycle, we have 10 views, and we can attribute 3 of those to a butt.
We'll at least double in numbers. We're gonna have 14, I bet you.
Oh, okay. Big predictions right now. Let's talk about house divisions.
Yeah, let's bust right into it. So, what happened during the chart sausage making?
What happened?
So as you may remember, gentle viewer, from last episode, I showed some time zone stuff and location lookup, and the chart that was there was showing some planets, but there was no details there, and I caveated that multiple times by saying this is a placeholder. This is not what it's going to look like eventually. And so a big part of this last cycle was ripping all of that out and replacing it with the foundation for the actual chart code and logic that we're going to use to actually present the chart in the product. So sort of making it real, if you want to think of it that way. However, the first thing that's in there now is house divisions. And this is kind of a cool one because for anybody that's used Urania, the only it will show the houses, but the only way of really the primary way of dividing the chart is by the zodiac. And so now we have a house division, sort of mechanism sort of built right in. But there's also, this is overlapping as well with how a system that we have in the application called perspectives, which I'm also going to talk a little bit about. So let's go into demo.
While you share your screen there, let me talk a little bit about why we call this chart sausage. And this is really a sausage making podcast, right? So what you're going to be seeing from us week over week is stuff that you're going to naturally react and be like, that looks like hot garbage. I don't know why you think you should be proud of that. So first of all,
speaking of,
you take your judgment away a little bit. You know what? Like, I'm very Saturnian, and yet I still see that as a little too judgy. So calm down. Number one. Easy, as we would say, easy. Number 2, I'm a designer, and as part of designer, you want to design every day, and that means that you have to put something out there. You have to put yourself out there every single day to say, through constant improvement, through feedback and a critique culture, to constantly be improving the thing that you are making that you want to put out into the world. This is not what we're going to put out in the world. We're going to put something very different out in the world eventually. But we want to show the sausage making process. And as part of that, what we would really appreciate from all of you, the 7 viewer that had come by, is if you do comment, like, just think about it for a second and say, like, if I was critiquing, if someone was critiquing something I was making, how would I want them to approach this? And there's kind of critique language around this. I would just say, like, if you don't like it, we want to hear what you don't like about it because it helps us. But like saying something that is just purely a comment about like what you prefer, whether it is something good, I like what you're doing, or something bad, I don't like what you're doing, doesn't really help us. Why don't you like what we're doing? What could we do better? And we want to hear. That's what the sausage making process is all about.
Yeah, and it's very early in the sausage making process too, so there's not even like a ton here to have an opinion on. So that's also
that's the most damning feedback, when there's so little or it's so bad that there is no opinion. So we're there.
Yeah, it's all uphill from here.
We understand. We're getting better.
Yeah,
it's all uphill from here.
But you know, for anybody
downhill.
that's used
uphill sounds worse.
What's that?
It's all downhill from here. Uphill sounds worse, right?
Yeah, I never like it. Yeah, because I think uphill is like a chart that's plotting, you know, sort of like getting better over time. But if it's like you're going up a hill, like you're hiking up a hill, then downhill is better. So I don't know. Depends on how you want to slice and dice that metaphor. Anyway, so yeah, so this is a chart. It is a very, very minimal chart. You might even notice that it has less than the chart that we showed last time, and that's because
things away.
What's that?
We took things away.
Yeah, exactly. And that's because, you know, this, as Jake said, this is part of the process. You know, we had something that was basically a placeholder in there for the purposes of doing some other work around it. And now that we've actually started to sort of make the chart real, you know, you start sort of one piece at a time. And in this particular case, we wanted to start with the houses. And dividing the wheel by the houses. So there's one thing that you might notice like right away. So we are currently looking at the house divisions of my natal chart. But you'll notice that the first house is kind of like down here on the bottom right. And that's because the chart is not rotated so that the beginning of the first house is off to the left. That's a separate thing. That's a separate ticket to implement. So, but you will notice that this is using a quadrant-based house system, as you can tell, because the houses are different sizes. And this is, in fact, using Placidus. And so these are the Placidus houses for my chart. So for anybody that's used Urania before, you know, we're operating in that same sort of metaphorical space of like being able to render charts in near real time and to update them as they update, you know, updating them in real time as you update time and location. And so I can demo that, you know, they do exactly that. So I'm just clicking forward by hours now, by tens of hours, etc. So another thing here is that I can, so these buttons, like everything here that you're seeing, very, very preliminary, these buttons will all go away. There's next cycle I'm very excited about because it will be related to these buttons going away, but we'll get there when we get there. So I can say I want to switch over to whole sign. And now I'm looking at the whole sign houses. And if I move forward in time, you'll see that the house divisions are remaining exactly the same. However, the first house is moving as the ascendant crawls its way around the chart. So very quickly, I've switched between Placidus and whole signs, and that's all working. If you had used Urania, you would know that that's also functionality that exists within Urania. So nothing new there, but this is new for Cosmic. So there's another thing that I wanted to demonstrate here as well, which is I put a button in here to remove the divisions. And that does exactly what it sounds like you would expect. So if I click remove divisions, they are gone. And the thing here, so this is going to dovetail, and I'm not going to super deep dive into perspectives, but I just want to give folks a little bit of an understanding about what we're doing and why we're doing it this way. So one of the things about Urania is that when I created Urania, I really wanted to have everything as accessible as possible, sort of like at the top level. So that it wouldn't be anything like a settings page or anything like I prefer this over this. And that went quite a ways until we started getting in, like when I added the lunar mansions. That was really when that broke, because there are definitely people who don't want to see the lunar mansions, and people who really do. And so then we, like, a settings page was born, and I hated it right out of the gate, and I still do. And so what we are doing in Cosmic is there's an underlying system called perspectives, and a perspective is any information that can be used to present something to the user in a way that they would be expecting to see it. So, for example, a perspective could say, I want to see, the 5 visible planets, the 2 luminaries, and I want whole sign houses, and that's it. I don't want anything else. And then, or a perspective might say, I want to see, everything to Pluto, and I want Placidus houses, and I want these colors for the planets and their rulership. So the zodiacal sign that they rule, I want those colors to match, and so on and so forth. So you can really, it's a very open-ended system, the way that it's designed. And you can also persist these perspectives. So this will eventually get into when you want to share a chart with somebody, it will come with that perspective. There's a whole bunch of stuff around here. We don't want to dig into the details too much about that. But the idea is that there is a way of representing how you view something in the application. And so
sorry, just to interrupt, because like I think when you were doing Urania back in the day, you said, I don't want to localize the software. I want this software to kind of be worldwide out of the box, right? And so you said,
correct,
as very little English as possible in order to convey what we need to convey in order to do good electional astrology. And the problem, and I like that, right? Because sometimes when we design software, design experiences, we'll create settings, and we're creating settings not because there's a good like 50-50 between 2 different things, but rather we don't want to have an opinion about something. I do feel like astrological software, traditional astrological software, kind of leaves it to the astrologer to be like, you know what, I'm going to give you everything. I'm going to give you every piece of data, every option, every way of manipulating this chart, and you figure it out. And really, there's a steep learning curve when it comes to software in order to do that.
Exactly.
Now, the thing is that you ran into this problem of like the difference between whole sign houses and Placidus houses. There are reasons why you want to switch between those 2 things. And there's reasons why you want to, it's not a preference of I only use whole sign houses or I only use Placidus houses. If we're even looking at the traditional literature, it shows that even in the Hellenistic era, people were switching between the 2 depending on those questions. I had just watched a whole podcast from Chris Brennan around electional astrology, and even said like, you were going to use whole sign houses, except we're going to move to Placidus, or quadrant houses, I should say, for a second, just to see where the amplification of the signal comes in when you're talking about the ascendant, descendant, the MC, and the IC. Right. And so these things, like knowing this now and knowing how practitioners actually do their work, and the tremendous amount of preferences that go into colors, showing house numbers or not showing house numbers, what house system we're using, all of these things need to be baked into essentially a very durable settings system, which is what this perspective is going to be, but not be so overwhelming like traditional astrological software is around here.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly correct. And with Urania though, I did. It was interesting because whole sign versus Placidus like house system, because it only supports those 2, which I think it's pretty fair to say are probably the most popular. It has just like a W and a P in the upper corner, so you could like click between them. But it was then it was like right after that I added lunar mansions, and then that was it just couldn't be done anymore. And to your point too, the part of why we wanted to do it this way and why we're building the system this way is because one of the best ways that, particularly if you're sort of just coming into astrology, or maybe you're just coming into using this particular astrology software or using astrology software generally, you probably have you probably are learning from somebody or learned from somebody and have some sort of preferences kind of coming out of the box. And so we will very likely have the perspective for you already that you can just kind of take and run with it, right? It's like, you are, doing a particular kind of, astrology that expects to see, sort of this set of things in this particular way. And then you have this as a perspective to start with, and then you can tweak that perspective over time. And you could have different perspectives for different ways that you want to work, and on and on. So it's a very flexible system. And I'm really excited about where we're going to be able to go with it. But what I'm doing in these cases where, so when I'm going from Placidus to whole sign, under the covers, what's happening is that the perspective is being updated, and the perspective itself, from a data model perspective, this is really for the nerds out there. If you're not into software engineering and stuff like that,
Nerd alert.
Just like fast forward a bit. Jake will put some timestamps in, so you can just go right past this part. But the data model here is relatively straightforward. There's a perspective table, and then there's an entities table. And entities have categories, so they could be things like points on a chart. They could be things like house system divisions. They could be things like, do I want to divide the house, or do I want to divide the wheel by houses? So things about rendering. They also have kind of a difference between things that come from an ephemeris, which we call given points, versus things that are derived from those places. So you can think of like the part of fortune is is derived from the ascendant and the position of the moon, et cetera. And so that is actually doesn't come from ephemeris, but it's derived. And so all of these things kind of, there's just this, in the data model, there's a many-to-many relationship between these two things. So there's a lookup table in the middle. And then that's how all of that persists. However, when you're using the software, you can also just say like, I want to just tweak I want to tweak something in the perspective. So in this case, like the perspective is stored in the database with the Placidus house system. I click the whole sign button, and then it says, for right now, I want to see whole sign, but I'm not actually changing the perspective itself. So I'm not persisting that change of the perspective. Eventually, then we will allow you to change the perspective. And this, after our next cycle, I think a lot of these pieces will start to make a little bit more sense together. And then the same thing with remove division. So that actually just removes the entity from the perspective that says, I want to divide the wheel by houses.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably good for talking about perspectives. This is a thing that's going to come back around. There's kind of like two fundamental systems in the application that are kind of underlying things that you'll probably hear over and over again. One is perspectives, and the other one is gatekeeper. And we'll eventually talk more about gatekeeper, which is our authentication and authorization system, which also encompasses what's called feature configs or feature flagging, which allows you to do things like testing on small numbers of users and rolling out features in a scaled way and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, we'll get there eventually.
If you're tap dancing in the background, it's because the dog is walking on the floor and is upset that the two daddies are now separated in the room. He is now at my door trying to get in. Anyways, that's fine. That happens. Okay, cool. And I'm very excited. I'm hoping that the kind of the robustness of these perspectives, because Trey had mentioned like the idea of if you kind of want to take a school of thought or a certain professor's class or a practitioner's class, that they have opinions about how you should approach astrology, and those opinions should be kind of codified within these perspectives. So the idea is like, if you're taking Austin Kopic's class, you might have a different perspective for a bit, as opposed to maybe Chris Brennan's class on the same topic, something like that.
Yeah, and it might even go in, you might have like a, here's the fundamentals of astrology, starting perspective, and then here's, did you just thumbs up?
Of course I did.
And then, and then here's like, I don't know, the semester B, here's year two, et cetera. So they could be graduated as well, like layering on more things as you go, right?
And what we never want to have happen is that you are hamstrung by the software. And as we've learned now from last week, it's not, we have a problem now because we actually looked up the etymology of hamstring and hamstrung. There was a piece of text that was so funny to me that I do want to pull it up, but I haven't pulled it up before. Trey, would you like to tell the listener about what happened last week when we talked about ham?
Yeah, well, the term hamstring came up, and I suddenly had the epiphany that maybe it means like strung up like ham, like to smoke a ham or something, that, like a ham hock, you like, tie it all up or whatever, you string it up. So this is maybe what hamstring means. Be very careful with my words here now that we know what we know.
Yeah. And so let's just go to the etymology of hamstring, because this is what I saw last night when we were walking. So obviously hamstring means it's a verb to disable or render useless. It's a figurative verbal extension of the noun, which is hamstring, which is, I'm not going to show my butt again, but the thing that goes kind of behind the butt, right?
Hey, whatever we got to do to get more viewers, honey.
And into the back of the knee. I refuse to put my leg up and show you my hamstring on camera at this moment. That would be too much. The thing that was so funny about this, so here's the thing. We say hamstrung as the past tense of hamstring. I was hamstrung. The literal sense of the verb is attested to 1670 because it's a verb from a noun compound. Hamstrung and its past participle is technically incorrect. And this is what I found to be hilarious. In hamstring, string is not the verb string. We do not string the ham, but do something to the tendon called the hamstring. The verb that is made not from two words, ham and string, but from the noun hamstring. It must therefore make hamstringed.
Hamstringed.
Put that word in your mouth for a second and just like swish it around and tell me how it feels. Hamstringed.
It's got a terrible mouthfeel. It's absolutely horrible. Hamstringed.
So what we were saying was hamstrunged. That was the big joke yesterday.
Yeah. So this is your follow-up on the hamstring saga. Now you know that it is not hamstrung, it is hamstringed. And you don't string a ham. It is literally referring to the hamstring, which is a tendon behind the knee, apparently.
Exactly. Render useless in that way. Let's talk a little bit about the design for a second. These things. So we're going to say the symbol and the name of that, what it kind of means, what the archetype is. We'll see if this kind of makes it in. But this is the design work that I did last week, actually.
The performer is great.
I like the performer a lot. I like the divine child a lot as well.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Being woke, I, of course, am looking forward to my female person of color leader, myself. And fine, the king, kind of douchey, makes sense, right? I don't know.
Fabulous, actually.
I went for fabulous, but also kind of over the top.
Yeah,
I guess that's what fabulous is.
Yeah,
I don't know. I felt like this was the best representation of the archetype of the king as it made sense to me about the sun. Like if I'm thinking of the sun, like I'm thinking some combination of like his ridiculousness and her amazingness. And it is it is not coincidental that she is staring at him with kind of like disdain.
Yeah,
100%.
You're so over the top.
Yeah, and the performer. These were not generated. These were taken lovingly from other people, but they're for private use and they're not for profit. So the last thing we wanted to go through was a little bit more dorkiness, which is we have these names for these episodes, right? And so this is called chart sausage. This episode name actually is the cycle that we are finishing. So we do weekly cycles where we focus on a specific aspect of what we want to accomplish. So chart sausage really was around kind of rebuilding the chart in a way that made sense, the way that Trey talked about, right? How it was going to kind of bring in those perspectives and how those things all work within software, which is much more complicated than I can probably explain. We are always conscientious about like what cycle is coming up next. Is there anything that you want to talk about while I start sharing linear here around cycles?
Um, Anybody who is familiar with like agile software methodologies, and I hate this terminology for many, many reasons, might be familiar with something called a sprint. And this is very purposefully not called a sprint.
Yeah. And
A cycle. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say the software that we're using also goes out of its way to not use the word sprint, because I think the word sprint has, I think in the past it had the right connotation of like, the idea was that everything was out of your way so that you could run as fast as possible. However, that definition, I think to some people, including myself, feels very regressive and is always like, you just need to keep running as fast as you can. And it's not about like having blocks in your way, but rather it's like, you need to run and you're not running fast enough. And the idea of cycles, I think, makes more sense for astrology anyways, because the cyclical nature of our planets. And also it just feels a little bit more modern in its language.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily about, we theme our cycles, and we try to make progress. We try to make significant progress on a specific thing. And the theme of the cycle sort of carries that forward. And then sometimes there's other things that are in there, and that's completely fine too. But what it's not is a way in Scrum, you would say, you have a sprint. The sprint is planned out. There's a certain number of story points probably that are applied to that sprint, and then at the end, if you didn't accomplish all of those things, then it's a failed sprint. And then in your retrospective, you have to figure out like what happened. Did we cost things poorly or whatever? And so that is a methodology. It can work in particular cases, but cycles are much more sort of just bookending chunks of time. So it's like every week we have a theme, we have things that are in there. If we move things in, if we move things out, that's completely fine. And it's still giving us a sense of our general week over week velocity. So we can see, sort of how many points were completed. And we just do sort of t-shirt sizing. So this gives numerical point values to them. But for our purposes, they're just small, medium, large. And then we have like an extra large, which means it needs to be broken down. And that's really all that we do. So it's relatively lightweight, and yeah, like I said, it's like bookending sections of time so that you can say like, okay, this is the stuff that we accomplished. Maybe we didn't actually accomplish everything. Although I will say that our burn down charts look pretty fabulous.
Yeah, this is not bad at all. Actually, I was just highlighting this thing. So this is like what Trey said, this is a burn down chart. The yellow line is what you've started. The blue line here is what you've completed. And so the gap here is how much work you're taking on at that moment. The idea here is that if all work is linear, and not all work is, but like if all work was linear, this dotted line is what you would kind of see as the progression of the cycle, right? The progression of the week. This gray line up here is the scope. And so what you'll see here is that lots of things get started, and then they're working on, and as things get completed, they kind of catch up to the started line. Something got brought into the scope. I think it was something that I did. I can't remember exactly what it was. This is another thing of agile that is not acceptable. Like you have to break a sprint in order to add something in, and it doesn't make sense, right? Because like when you start doing this work, you're like, there is something that we're missing here. And I think it had to do with like the house numbering and the definitions of house numbering, which is a relatively small task to do. But like we realized, oh, there's actually something that we need to put into our documentation, and we need to like put into code here that is very important. So they got brought in, and then something got brought out, whatever. And then we're at the end of because we do this video, we're at the end of the cycle, and all of the lines meet up regardless of, whether you failed or not. And
Yeah.
we don't use the language of failing.
Yeah.
We haven't planned yet the next cycle. That's usually what we do after this video. But I did put some things in here for me because Trey went shopping for wool and rocks, and so I was like, I've got some time while Trey picks up his. I mean, I guess you were playing like not Carcassonne. What's the other game? The hexagon tiles where you Settlers of Catan. You were
Settlers
playing
of Catan, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You picked up your wool and your stone. While you were doing that, I made sure that like here's the whole planets thing that I was talking about and getting that into our deck. But also we have this thing that we're calling the Celestial Console.
Yeah, don't spoil it.
I'm not going to spoil it. We're just looking at this. It's fine. Eagle-eyed viewers can spoil it for themselves and read whatever's on here. But yeah, and that's a little bit of my dorkiness. Yeah, and I think that's a good end of the cycle. Is there anything else that we should talk about? We talked about Hamstrung'd, which is very important.
Yeah, I think at some point too, we should really talk about because you mentioned as a part of the cycle, sort of how we basically to talk about like the design process, noun foraging,
Oh yeah,
how,
that's coming.
yeah.
My complete nerdiness around OOUX, which is called object-oriented user experience, and the ORCA process, the ORCA process. Oh, you buckle up, because while I think that I'm going to lose the audience, but I'm going to try my hardest to not lose the audience on that one.
Well, there's going to be some people that you're going to like really win over.
I hope so. I hope so. At least I know one, Sophia Prata, and I'm sure that she will love the fact that I'm talking about her stuff. Anyways, thank you very much. Be well. And let us know what your favorite planet is. Is it a malefic? Are you weird? Let us know. Write in the comments.
Like, subscribe.
Like, subscribe. All right. We love you. Be well. Bye. Bye.